Welcome to The Social Lens by Skoob. I'm your host, Beatrice Goodwin, and today we're diving deep into one of the most fascinating questions about human behavior. Are we all just actors on the grand stage of life? Picture this. You wake up tomorrow morning, look in the mirror, and suddenly realize that everything you do, from the way you smile at your barista to how you present yourself in that big meeting, is actually a carefully orchestrated performance. Sounds unsettling? Well, buckle up, because we're about to explore how a brilliant sociologist named Erving Goffman turned this unsettling thought into one of the most compelling theories about human identity ever conceived. Let's start our journey in 1959, when Erving Goffman dropped a bombshell on the academic world. In his groundbreaking work, The Presentation of Self in Everyday Life, Goffman proposed something revolutionary: that every single human interaction is essentially a theatrical performance. Now, before you start thinking this sounds cynical or fake, hear me out. Goffman wasn't suggesting we're all manipulative liars. Instead, he was observing something far more nuanced and, frankly, beautiful about human nature. Think about the last job interview you had. Remember how you prepared? You probably rehearsed your answers, chose your outfit carefully, maybe even practiced your handshake. You articulated every response with precision, didn't you? That's what Goffman called a deliberate and rehearsed performance. But here's where it gets interesting. After attending multiple interviews, something magical happens. You start naturally conducting yourself in a manner that fits these situations. The performance becomes so internalized that it feels authentic. But Goffman noticed something even more fascinating. Sometimes our performances happen automatically, shaped by our societal privileges and norms. Picture a white man from an upper-middle-class background with an MBA walking into that same interview. For him, generating the right impression might feel seamlessly natural, not because he's more qualified, but because society has equipped him with the cultural tools to perform this role effortlessly. And here's the kicker. Whether we're completely absorbed in the authenticity of our own performances, truly believing our greatest flaw is something as innocuous as perfectionism, or whether we're painfully aware that our act is just a facade, the performance never stops. Even when we're not consciously trying to perform, we still have an audience, and our actions continue to create effects. Goffman captured this beautifully when he wrote, "All the world is not, of course, a stage, but the crucial ways in which it isn't are not easy to specify." Think about that for a moment. He's saying that life and theater are so similar that it's actually difficult to pinpoint exactly how they differ. That's profound. Now let's dig into something uncomfortable but crucial: the element of self-deception that Goffman identified in our daily performances. To communicate our identity effectively, Goffman argued, we must engage in a certain amount of self-deception. We have to withhold certain truths to convincingly portray our roles. This isn't necessarily malicious. It's often necessary for social functioning. Let me paint you a picture. Imagine someone at that job interview asked about their greatest weakness. They might consciously avoid acknowledging that their real issue is drinking on the job, instead offering up something trivial like, "I'm too much of a perfectionist," or "I care too much." They're not just lying to the interviewer. They might be convincing themselves that this sanitized version is the real truth. Or consider this scenario. You're at dinner with a friend who's going through relationship drama. Again, you slip into what Goffman would call the role of therapist, nodding sympathetically, offering advice, asking the right questions. But inside, you might be desperately wanting to escape, to go home and binge watch Netflix instead of dissecting another romantic crisis. Yet you maintain the performance because that's what good friends do, right? But here's where it gets really interesting. Goffman observed that we perform even when there's no tangible audience present. Picture a woman alone in her apartment on a Sunday afternoon. She chooses to clean her kitchen and organize her files, instead of lounging in bed, eating ice cream, and scrolling through social media. Why? Because she's projecting an image of stability and discipline to what Goffman called an imaginary observer. Or think about those moments when you practice facial expressions in the mirror, trying to convince yourself, yes, yourself, that you're attractive, confident, worthy. The idea that an unseen audience is present wields incredible influence over our behavior, even in our most private moments. Here's where Goffman's theory becomes both comforting and liberating. He recognized that this constant performance would be exhausting if it never ended. Thankfully, it doesn't have to. Goffman introduced us to the concept of moving between front stage and backstage areas of our lives. The front stage is where the formal performance happens. The job interview, the client presentation, the dinner party where you're meeting your partner's parents for the first time. But backstage? That's where the magic of authentic human connection happens. Think about those moments when you and your coworkers finally escape to the bar after a massive presentation. You're no longer the polished professional who just pitched to potential investors. You're collapsing into chairs, loosening ties, maybe admitting that you completely blanked on that one question. You're with your teammates, people who participated in the day's performance and can now drop the act together. Or picture a newlywed couple retreating to their hotel room after their wedding reception. For hours, they've been the perfect bride and groom, graciously accepting congratulations, posing for photos, making sure every guest feels welcome. But now, in their private space, they can finally acknowledge their exhaustion, laugh about Uncle Bob's inappropriate speech, maybe even admit they're both a little overwhelmed by the whole thing. The beauty of backstage spaces is that while some level of performance might persist, we're never completely unguarded. There's a shared ease among the participants. Meanwhile, the front stage audience, those wedding guests, those potential investors, hopefully perceive the performance as genuine and convincing. This is crucial because it shows us that having a performed self doesn't make us fake or inauthentic. It makes us human. We need both spaces, the front stage where we meet social expectations and achieve our goals, and the backstage where we can decompress and connect authentically with our fellow performers. Now we come to perhaps the most mind-bending part of Goffman's theory, his assertion that the self is not the source of our performances, but rather their product. Let me repeat that because it's revolutionary. The self is not what creates the performance. The self is what emerges from the performance. In our society, we tend to believe that our roles and our identity are intrinsically linked. We imagine the self as something located within our physical bodies, somewhere in our upper torso maybe, mixed in with our psychology and biology. It feels natural to think this way, but Goffman argued this understanding is fundamentally flawed. Here's how it actually works. When we perform in social interactions, we're creating an image, usually a positive one, that we want others to perceive. When people begin to see this image as accurate, they attribute a self to us. But, and this is crucial, this attributed self doesn't originate from within us. It emerges from the entire social setting where our actions take place. It's the characteristics of our social interactions that allow observers to interpret and infer our self. So when we execute a scene properly in social interaction, our audience attributes a self to the character we're performing. But this self is a consequence of our action, not its cause. Think about it this way. You're not born with a predetermined professional self that you then express in work situations. Instead, through repeatedly engaging in professional interactions, meetings, presentations, networking events, you and others gradually construct what becomes your professional self. This self feels real because it is real, but it's real as a social construction, not as some innate essence. This means the self isn't governed by biological life cycles of birth, growth, and death. It's a dramatic effect that emerges from the scenes we present during interactions. The central question isn't whether this self is inherently authentic, but whether it's credible in the context where it's being performed. So if the self is constructed through social performance, what exactly creates it? Goffman identified an entire machinery of self-production, and it's more elaborate than you might think. The resources used to produce and sustain ourselves aren't actually within us as individuals. Instead, they're built into the frameworks of social institutions. There's a whole infrastructure supporting every performance. Picture a backstage region. Maybe it's your bedroom, your car, or the employee break room. This space is equipped with tools to craft and prepare your body for performance. Your closet full of different outfits for different occasions, your bathroom mirror where you practice presentations, your private space where you can decompress and prepare for the next act. Then there's the front stage, which contains what Goffman called fixed props. The conference room with its imposing table, the restaurant with its romantic lighting, the classroom with its arrangement of desks. These spaces are designed to support certain types of performances and make others nearly impossible. But the real magic happens through teamwork. There's your performance team, colleagues who collaborate with you to create the context from which your professional self emerges. Think about how your coworkers support your authority when you're leading a meeting, or how your friends help establish your identity as the funny one in your social group. Then there's the audience team, interpreting your performance and helping to manifest yourself. When your boss nods approvingly during your presentation, when your friends laugh at your jokes, when strangers treat you with the respect you're projecting, they're all participating in the creation of yourself. The self is essentially a product of these orchestrated arrangements, and like any complex machinery, sometimes it malfunctions. The individual components become visible. You can see the backstage management, the team coordination, the audience discretion. But when it's functioning smoothly, it creates swift, seamless impressions that immerse everyone in the reality being constructed. Here's something fascinating. This theatrical nature of human interaction isn't a modern phenomenon. Goffman's insights help us understand behaviors that go back thousands of years. Take ancient Greek drama, for instance. In Aeschylus's Agamemnon, there's a scene where Clytemnestra greets her husband, returning from Troy. She delivers a speech to both Agamemnon and the chorus of Argive elders that transforms from an expression of lonely longing into an overwhelming tribute. But it's all performance. She's setting up her husband for murder. The fascinating part is how she uses her rhetorical prowess to persuade Agamemnon to walk over a luxurious purple carpet into his palace. This isn't just dramatic flair, it's a masterclass in social manipulation. She captivates her audience with compelling fiction, much like we do in our daily interactions. Greek drama was built around these agonistic encounters, characters attempting to persuade others before an audience, typically represented by the chorus. Sound familiar? It's the same structure we see in modern boardrooms, courtrooms, classrooms, and even dinner parties. Self-presentation and persuasive interaction have been crucial elements of human society for millennia. The Greeks understood something we sometimes forget, that public performance is fundamental to human social organization. Whether it's a hero in an epic narrative, a citizen speaking in an assembly, or a participant in a symposium, the ability to present oneself effectively has always been central to social success. Now let's explore something remarkable. We're all much better actors than we realize. In theatrical performances, actors get scripts for dialogue, but guidance for expressions, gestures, and subtleties is often minimal. Directors assume that skilled performers have an intuitive understanding of how to manage their voices, faces, and body language. The same is true for us in everyday life. Socialization doesn't require us to memorize every detail of specific roles. That would be impossible given the time and energy constraints. Instead, we learn enough expressive fragments to effectively improvise whatever role we encounter. Our daily performances aren't consciously acted with full awareness, nor are they crafted solely for their potential impact. Here's the beautiful part. The expressions we give off that seem most genuine often remain beyond our direct perception. We don't plan our eye movements or gestures in advance, yet our expressions and actions are orchestrated through repeated social experience. Think about a professional wrestler on TV, Watch him snarl at his opponent, recognizing that despite appearances, he's portraying the villain. He's aware of this role and could seamlessly switch to playing the hero in a different match. The specific expressions and movements aren't scripted. They arise spontaneously from fluency in a particular dramatic idiom. Or consider spiritual possession in various cultures. When people in West Indies voodoo ceremonies become horses for entering deities, their ability to embody these spirits comes from lifelong cultural exposure and participation. The context supports their believable portrayal, even though everyone involved believes in the authenticity of the divine encounter. Similarly, when someone adopts a naive persona to charm a romantic interest, observers might recognize strategic elements while accepting their fundamental identity as authentic. The performance works because it draws on deep cultural conditioning about how people of certain ages, genders, and social positions should behave. Here's where Goffman's analysis becomes both profound and slightly unsettling. He identified what we might call a moral marketplace, where performers become merchants of morality. As performers, we focus on sustaining the illusion that we adhere to the many standards by which our character and actions are judged. These standards are so abundant and pervasive that we exist within a moral framework more than it might initially appear. But here's the twist. As performers, our focus shifts from actually meeting these moral standards to creating a convincing appearance that we're meeting them. This creates a fascinating paradox. Much of our activity becomes preoccupied with moral issues, but from a performer's perspective, there's often little genuine moral concern. We become merchants of morality, constantly engaging with moral goods that we display to others. Think about social media as the ultimate example of this. We curate our posts to show our values, sharing articles about social justice, posting photos of charitable activities, expressing concern for important causes. We're trading in moral currency, but the focus is often more on the impression we create than on the actual impact of our actions. The more we become engrossed in these moral tokens, the more detached we might feel from both the products we're selling and the consumers who trustingly buy them. This commitment to projecting a consistent moral image compels us to become skilled in the art of performance. This brings us to a crucial distinction in Goffman's theory: the split between the performer and the character within each of us. In Anglo-American society particularly, we can think of ourselves as divided into two aspects. The performer is the harried creator of impressions, continuously engaged in the exhausting work of conducting a performance. This is the part of you that worries about how you're coming across, that strategizes about what to say next, that feels the pressure of maintaining your image. Meanwhile, the character is often portrayed as noble, showcasing the strengths and virtues that the performance is meant to highlight. This is the idealized version of yourself that you want others to see: competent, moral, attractive, worthy of respect and affection. Although fundamentally different, both the performer and the character derive their significance from ensuring that the show continues. The performer works tirelessly to maintain the illusion, while the character provides the content that makes the performance worthwhile. This division helps explain why we sometimes feel exhausted by social interaction. The performer in us is constantly working, while the character represents who we aspire to be. The gap between these two aspects of ourselves can create tension, but it also drives us toward growth and self-improvement. Let's explore how this understanding of performance gives us tremendous power to shape our social reality. Rather than allowing impressions to develop naturally as side effects of our authentic activities, we can deliberately refocus our efforts to craft specific desired impressions. Instead of strictly achieving goals through traditional means, we can aim to project the perception of success. This capacity for impression management arises because observers rely on representations rather than reality. A representation can serve as a stand-in for the actual thing, creating opportunities for strategic presentation. Many individuals and groups believe that adhering strictly to traditional methods would be detrimental to their success, so they resort to directly managing the impressions they deliver. This transforms social interaction into a kind of theater, where the observed become a performing ensemble and treat observers like an audience. Actions that appear directed at practical goals become gestures meant for audience consumption, dramatizing activities for maximum effect. But here's what's important to understand. This isn't necessarily deceptive or manipulative. It's often simply realistic. In a world where perception significantly impacts opportunity, managing impressions becomes a survival skill. Finally, let's consider how deeply our performances are embedded in cultural programming. Social expectations impose specific standards and behaviors based on attributes like age, gender, social class, and cultural background. Being a particular kind of person involves more than possessing certain traits. It requires upholding the conduct and appearance that your social group associates with those traits. When an American middle-class young woman adopts a naive persona to entertain someone she's interested in, she's drawing on deep cultural scripts about femininity, youth, and romantic interaction. The performance works because everyone involved shares understanding of these cultural codes. The ease with which we execute these socially prescribed routines doesn't negate their performative nature. Instead, it indicates the depth of our cultural conditioning. We perform with sophistication and nuance that often surpasses our conscious understanding. This cultural programming starts early and continues throughout our lives. We learn not just what to do, but how to feel authentic while doing it. The most successful performances are those where the performer genuinely embodies the role they're playing. So, are we all just pretending? Not quite. Goffman reminds us, the self isn't fake, it's performed, and that's what makes it real. The roles we play, at work, at home, with friends, are all pieces of a larger, living self. We're not confined to one identity. We create who we are through every interaction. But here's the twist. If identity is a performance, then what happens when the lines blur or when the script runs out? To hear the rest of the story, download the Skoob app now. Discover how our daily roles reveal deeper truths and how performance might just be the most authentic thing we do.